Archives of Prasar Bharati presents the timeless treasure of golden era.
Hello and welcome to Living on the Edge. This week on our program, an investigation into the health hazards confronting sandstone miners in Rajasthan, a report on the shocking experiments conducted on hapless animals in Delhi's laboratories, and a visit to the Kanha National Park in Madhya Pradesh to see how the Barasingha was saved from extinction. Famous for its toughness and durability, sandstone has been used to build palaces and forts from time immemorial. Found extensively in the Thar desert, it hasn't lost its popularity and continues to be mined with ruthless efficiency. So ruthless that workers die of silicosis at regular intervals. And yet, they receive neither a minimum wage nor compensation. Nandini Rajwade visited Jodhpur to file this report.
डॉक्टर को जब दिखाया था क्या बोला उन्होंने?
उन्होंने कहा खांसी की बीमारी है टीबी। जब पर लोग आया था फोटो लिया ये फोटो तो जाए खांस लिया भी पास लोग आए नहीं मार धनी रे फोटो मार गुडे आवे खांस छोड़ मार खाना ले जान भी फोटो खांस या कहतन पया मेड़ी था मजूरी वास्ते नहीं चाहिए छोटा बच्चा है महीने फ्री इलाज साली ये लोग पास आए इसको गुजरी महीने 4 होगा पास आए
Chuna Ram died of silicosis at the age of 38, leaving behind a wife and 5 children. He had been working in a sandstone mine for over 20 years. There are about 70,000 labourers in the mines around Jodhpur who are in danger of suffering a similar fate. Silicosis, a lung disease, is caused by inhaling silica dust, the main component of sandstone. It is incurable and results in death.
जो यहाँ पे डॉक्टर्स हैं वो लोग भी इस चीज को आसानी से या तो पहचान रहे हैं फिर वो कह नहीं पा रहे हैं जितने भी लोग टीबी से लोग मर रहे हैं उनको हालांकि थोड़ा बहुत तो सिलिकोसिस तो होता ही है अगर वो खान में काम किया है ये तो पक्का वो भी जानते हैं लेकिन वो लोग पता नहीं क्यों उसको डिक्लेयर नहीं कर पाते हैं वो लोग उसे टीबी करके ही मानते हैं और वो मजदूर खत्म हो जाता है हर 7वें या 8वें पेशेंट के पीछे एक सिलिकोसिस का पेशेंट होता है
Silicosis is included in the list of occupational diseases under the Workmen's Compensation Act, but mine owners are either unaware of existing laws or feign ignorance. मजदूरों का लॉ है कानून है उनके बारे में आपको कुछ मालूम है ना और उनको कितना ये मिनिमम वेज भी एक देना होता है ना एक जितना पैसे मिलने चाहिए उनको साल में उसके बाद में आपको मालूम है कितना मिलना चाहिए कितना नहीं
अभी तक तो की नहीं जो मालूम है ही नहीं मेरे को भी कुछ मालूम नहीं इसके बारे में तो कानून के बारे में नहीं मालूम
और ये ऐसा है कानून है जैसे कितना घंटा काम करना चाहिए अगर बीमार पड़ जाओ तो उसमें पैसे देना चाहिए
वो मालूम नहीं
गवर्नमेंट की तरफ से कोई जैसे माइन ऑफिस का काम है या लेबर इंस्पेक्टर्स हैं या लेबर कमिश्नर हैं जिन पर ये रेस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है कि वो वहाँ जाकर चेक करें कि कोई भी अगर लेबर लॉ को फ्लॉज करा जा रहा है इम्प्लीमेंट नहीं किया जा रहा है तो उसको लागू कराने की जिम्मेदारी यहाँ के लेबर इंस्पेक्टर की भी है लेकिन सर्वे में साफ तौर से आया कि कोई लेबर इंस्पेक्टर कभी जाता ही नहीं है
Under the rules laid down by the state government, the responsibility for the notification of a proven case of silicosis lies with doctors. Sadly, most doctors confuse symptoms with those of tuberculosis. Worse, there are many who correctly identify the disease but prefer not to get involved with the legal process that makes compensation possible. Perhaps that's why Rajasthan doesn't have a single recorded case of silicosis to date. We never got a chance to put this to government doctors in Jodhpur because they refused to meet us. An official of the State Mines Department, however, agreed to speak to us. But his answers didn't fill us with optimism.
There is no such record.
No such record.
But it should be recorded. We will try now.
Hanji, because we visited somebody in the villages, one of the workers, Chunni Lal karke, jo guzar gaye because of he had this disease.
Everybody will die के बाद उसे, but इससे बढ़िया उनको कोई work नहीं मिल सकता. It is self-employment.
That's the crux of it. The majority of the workers belong to the scheduled castes and tribes and have no other option. They are critically dependent on daily wages earned from the mines and therefore continue working even though they are aware of the long-term consequences on their health and well-being.
20 साल से हम काम कर रहे हैं कानिया में. काम करने से फेफड़ा गड़बड़ हो जाता है और मजदूरी करते करते थक जाते हैं. बुखार चढ़ता हो, ताव चढ़ता है, अपने आप इलाज कराते हैं, कोई नहीं कराता है. आगे 4-5 साल और को धंधा करेंगे, अपने आगे नहीं होगा. बस
सांस में ऐसी है, रात को सोते हैं जिस टाइम इतना दर्द होता है कि जैसे मतलब यानी सांस के साथ ही खत्म हो जाते हैं.
आप बोलते हो ये बहुत ज्यादा डस्ट जाने से हो जाता है, तो फिर आप यहाँ पे काम क्यों करते हो?
काम तो पेट भरने के लिए और बच्चे पालने के लिए करना पड़ता है.
And as long as the government persists with its plans to expand mining without ensuring accountability for worker ill health, things can only get worse.
It seems that the mine owners and the politicians are hand in gloves. More mines are working which are illegal, and more areas are being mined without the knowledge of the government, or even if the government knows about it, they are keeping quiet because it's a big game going on.
Mining को increase करना चाहिए, मतलब इससे ultimately government revenue को फर्क पड़ेगा. Means government को resources तो चाहिए.
They make a lot of money, and some part of it obviously goes to those people who are always working behind the curtain.
Given the way things are, trade unions are perhaps the only way worker rights can be safeguarded. At present, labourers are dealt with as individuals, and it is easy to take advantage of them, given the fact that workers are freely available.
गवर्नमेंट ने तो बिल्कुल ही मतलब हमेशा ये प्रयत्न किया कि उनको नहीं मालूम पड़े उतना ही अच्छा है. जब तक ट्रेड यूनियन नहीं बनेगी तब तक हम किसी वर्कर को कोई लंबा चौड़ा फायदा नहीं दिला सकते, क्योंकि बाहर से बैठकर अगर आपके पास में ऑर्गेनाइजेशन नहीं है, संगठन नहीं है, तो बाहर से बैठकर छुटपुट 2-4 केसेस तो आप कर सकते हैं, लेकिन उनकी जो डे टू डे प्रॉब्लम है वो एक ट्रेड यूनियन ही सॉल्व कर सकती है.
Just how soon this will happen and how many workers will be fatally affected by then is impossible to gauge. The only rewards Chunaram received for his labour, besides his wages, were illness and death. And yet, to support 5 children, his widow must permit her 15-year-old son to work in the very mine that eventually claimed her husband's life.
If the primitive conditions in the sandstone mines caused you to shudder, wait till you see what happens in our state-of-the-art research laboratories. Every month, hundreds of innocent monkeys are tortured, injected and done to death, all to add to man's vast store of scientific knowledge. Shonar Joshi reports.
Nimble hands and feet and superb eyesight enable them to scale walls and jump from one point to another with ease. They are equally at home on trees and on the ground. They live in strong social groups, with infants critically dependent on their mothers to learn whatever they need to know. Rhesus monkeys are members of the same group of mammals from which man has evolved and are the most common. To most of us, they are dangerous, being carriers of rabies. They steal food with impunity and seem to have no respect for man's evolution. But then, neither does man seem to be concerned about this primate's existence, except when monkeys intrude into his day-to-day activities. In fact, man's lack of concern goes far beyond this. Nearly 90% of all rhesus monkeys have been wiped out by commercial trapping during the last 30 years. Trapping only precedes the most extreme and cruel forms of torture and experimentation that monkeys are subjected to, all so that man can benefit from advances in medicine and science. This is Koyal, researchers intrigued by the peculiar bobbing of her head decided to study her closely and found a number printed on her which seemed to confirm she had been experimented with. When he is angry, Henry, another monkey, reacts by biting his arm, as does Abdul, who was found unconscious on a highway. Very often, the animals are abandoned after being subjected to who knows what. They are usually unable to reintegrate into their community with abnormalities in their behavioral patterns. According to one estimate, between 50 and 80,000 monkeys are sacrificed each year at the altar of science. The question is, has it been worth it?
Not at all. Most of the experiments which were done on animals, when they were tried on human beings, they did not show the required results at all. And that time the medical scientists wanted to keep quiet about it. Thalidomide were tested on monkeys and nothing happened. It was when it was given to pregnant mothers, the offspring were without limbs.
Despite the fact that successful animal testing does not guarantee an efficacious remedy for humans, research continues. Because of the nature of the work, animals are usually kept in small, smelly cages under the supervision of untrained keepers.
They are in isolated cages. One animal extends the hand, the other one from the other cage tries to touch it. This is in Institute of Immunology.
Living on the Edge was unable to establish the veracity of this claim because permission to film was denied to us. Does that mean that the lab has something to hide?
I think that answer I will not be able to give you. It looks like that since the code of ethical and the ethical code is not being followed, probably they must be reluctant.
If you are wondering just what experiments are conducted on animals, here are a few samples. Obviously, we were unable to film the test, but we were able to obtain slides which reveal just how barbaric science can become.
In the Dre's eye test, chemicals are dripped into open eyes till the animal goes blind. In the battering drum experiment, the animal is put in a drum and made to revolve 60 times a minute to know the force needed to knock off the teeth of the animal. Sometimes, the newborn monkey's eyes are either bandaged or the lids are stitched. The young one is kept like this for 257 to 635 days to prove that the vision does not develop if neonatal lids are kept closed. Live animals are immersed in boiling water or put in flames to create third-degree burns to prove that destruction of tissues takes place in 8 hours' time. At times, the animal is subject to inhalation of poisonous fumes and creation of mutants through radiation. One of the most barbaric experiments is when steel plates are fixed around the animal's head and the skull is squeezed until it pops.
Using the animals and equating them with the human beings will be a futile exercise. The researcher should be accountable. He should answer why he did the experiment. Does this experiment was really important? Whether the experiment is a mere repetition of the whatever has been done outside the country, or this is just for completing the thesis.
Cruelty so shocking, even absurd, is usually justified on the grounds that it is aimed at improving human health and welfare. Today, however, there are several alternatives to the physical testing of animals. Vitro research is one such possibility.
Another way is that we use tissue culture. We use aborted placenta because it is from the human being, it is from the human body. Naturally, the reaction of the chemicals, the reaction of the drugs will be better, will be more clear on it than on an animal which has a different system.
But this logic is lost in the research community. Most of the members of the committee that controls and supervises experiments are those who conduct the tests themselves. Perhaps that's why cruel practices continue to be perpetrated and escape public scrutiny. Utmost secrecy shrouds the experiments.
In a place like ours in India, where best intentions are not even guaranteed, where the desire is to make a fast buck, there, I'm sorry to say, the regulatory bodies, even though they may do their best, they do not succeed in ensuring that the toxicity trials, trials are properly done and the clinical trials are also properly done.
In these circumstances, is it possible to reduce animal testing? Living on the Edge discovered that there are several areas where it is possible to limit experiments.
Banning the use of testing of cosmetics on animals, reduction of dissection in educational institutions, random checks on research establishments to be made mandatory. Experiments on animals to be designed so as to avoid unnecessary pain or stress, to encourage vitro research like organ tissue and cell culture, testing variants for drugs already available to be restricted.
At the end of the day, there's very little average citizens can do, and many of our viewers, depressed by the visuals, may feel trapped into thinking they are responsible in some way. But would it hurt you to know that the pills you pop in your mouth and the perfumes you use are perfected on animals using the most brutal means? And more often than not, tests are inconclusive. After all, what works on one of nature's creatures may not work on another.
From that nightmarish tale to a happier one. It's only natural for human sympathy to be aroused by lovable species like the panda or magnificent ones like the tiger and elephant. But shy and plain animals have a right to our protection too. And that's what makes the success story of the Indian Barasingha significant. Sunil Manoharan visited the Kanha National Park in Madhya Pradesh to see just how the Barasingha was saved from extinction and what we can do to prevent its numbers from dwindling.
The year 1969. The state, Madhya Pradesh. The Barasingha or swamp deer is virtually extinct. Its numbers have dwindled to 66. It's the same story: habitat loss, poaching and the extension of agriculture. These three factors usually add up and another species disappears. But this time it didn't. A 28-hectare area was set aside and insulated from predators and human intervention. Food was made available and the Barasingha carefully monitored.
Due to the concerted efforts under Project Tiger, the high grass, which was very much essential for the fawning of the species, that was restored, and the animal could breed properly, in that it could get the adequate fawning cover.
And breed they did. There are over 400 Barasinghas in the park today and are no longer confined to enclosures.
So this is one of the very, very solid examples in sight, which anybody can show around in the country, that a species can be saved properly if properly dealt with.
One would have thought that conservation achieved in the face of the odds that existed in the 1960s would have motivated officials to be vigilant and prevent a slide back in protection efforts. Instead, the grasslands in Kanha, which are home to the Barasingha, are being rapidly destroyed, and this threatens to reduce to naught almost 30 years of conservation.
I'm particularly concerned and worried about the meadows, because they have changed drastically. I mean, when I first came here, there was high, tall grass. I mean, it was unbelievable. You wouldn't recognize it. It looked more like sort of Kaziranga, that sort of elephant grass type, but it wasn't the same species. And now they're very, very overgrazed, not by cattle, which is the usual case, but by the large numbers of cheetal.
This means that the natural cycle that allows large numbers of animals to coexist in some sort of equilibrium is being destroyed. If the cheetal proliferate as rapidly as they are at present, the habitat of the Barasingha will disappear, pushing them back to the brink. This is just what makes conservation so difficult and contradictory. It's only when species are allowed to grow and die through natural processes in a closed ecosystem that balance is maintained and no species gets special treatment. The Barasingha perhaps is the best case in point.
For every ton of waste paper that is collected and reused, at least 2 trees are saved.